Hi, this is Rebecca from Show Me Scrapping, and today I want to show you how to make a cutout card on your Cricut machine. The one I'm going to make is this card here. It has a card base that has this nice pretty scalloped edge and then a star cut out of the front. And I created this by slicing two images together, and I just want to take you through that step by step, and then you can take the same method and you can create additional cards with your own card bases and shapes. In fact, any image that is on Cricut you can turn into a cutout card. So let's get started. So the images that I'm using are both from the Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge. I love this cartridge because it has so many great shapes. In fact, it has a lot of cutout cards. As I scroll down, you're going to see all of these gorgeous cutout cards that you could just use as they are, but sometimes it's not exactly what you want. Notice that some of these are square cards, some of these are rectangular, and of course it might not have the shape that you want. So today I want one that has the star, and it actually is the star that coordinates with one of the stamp sets that comes with your Art Philosophy bundle. So the card that I'm starting with is a blank card, and I'm just going to type the image number up here to save us some time from hunting. Unfortunately, finding an image on a Cricut cartridge inside of Design Space is still a little bit hairy, and the easiest way to find an image is if you do know the image number. And so I happen to know it because I made this card earlier, and so I kept track of that image. This is just a simple card. It has a scallop on one edge, and you can see it has a score line down the middle. So I'm going to use that. And then the second image I'm going to use is a star shape. And again, I wrote down the image number so I wouldn't have to hunt for it. And here it is. So I'm going to insert both of those images onto my canvas. Now, this star actually has two layers. It has a bottom layer that is flat and a top layer where you can cut kind of these, what would you call them? What's the word I want? It's on the tip of my tongue, but anyway, it's just stars kind of layered inside of each other just to give it a nice design. But we're not going to use that. And in fact, since I am going to be slicing this, I'm going to delete that top image. In order to slice, you can't have, if I wasn't going to slice it, if I was just going to cut the bottom flat image, I could hide, which is done by clicking on the eyeball next to it. But I actually want to delete it. And I'm just going to click delete and gone. So this is the star that I want. The stamp set I'm going to use stamps this shape at 2 1/4 inch. But I want my hole to be just a little bit larger so that when I stamp it through, a little bit of white shines around the outside. Not only because I think that looks nice, but also if I don't get the star in exactly the right place. If I cut it exactly the size of the stamp, you're definitely going to be able to see if I don't get it exactly where it needs to go. So I'm going to go over here to Edit and change the height of the stamp to 2 1/2. Like I said, the stamp set, the height of it is 2 1/4. I'm going to do 2 1/2. Those of you that have some of the close to my heart Cricut cartridges know that on the carrier sheet it is going to show the size of the stamp or the size of the image that you need to cut. That is always the height. So in Design Space, that is the second number. So 2 1/2 there. So this is going to make my star just a little bit bigger than the stamp set that I'm going to use. Here's my card base. Right now, this pulled in fairly small. You can see the height is 2.37. I want this to be a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 card when I'm done. And if you look at the way this is positioned, and sometimes they come in differently, so you just have to pay attention. It'll always be the way it's in the handbook. So if you have a handbook, if the spiral is the top of the page, that height is what you would expect the height to be. In this case, I want the height to be 5 1/2. And when I change that, you can see that the width became almost 8 inches. Now if this was just a standard card, we would expect that to be 8.5, because when you fold a 4 1/4, or when you open up a 4 1/4 card, that 4 1/4 times 2 is 8.5. It's a little bit less. The card actually turns out a little bit less than 4 1/4. You could unlock the size here and adjust that. I'm going to leave it because I'm going to let the scallop kind of be short so that more of the underside of the card shows. The technique that we're going to do today is actually taking this star, and let me move it to the top so that we can see it, and putting it on the front of the card. And then we are going to slice these two images together. And what that will do is just take, basically slicing. This is when you have two shapes layered on top of each other. Every cut that is on either of the two shapes is going to go through both sets of material. And so in this case, where I have the star centered on the front, the cuts of the card do not impact this at all because they are not overlapping. The only lines that are overlapping, the only cutting lines that are overlapping, are right here around that star. So it's going to be kind of like taking a cookie cutter and just cutting it right through all of the materials that are there, which include the star itself as well as the card base. Now, before I can do that, let me just show you something. If I were to highlight both of these, so I've selected them both, and I try to slice, and the slice function is up here in layers. It's going to show up here. Right now it's disabled. And the reason is right now I have three things selected. That's the star, and then both pieces of the card. You can see there is a score line as well as the card base. And when you're slicing, you can only slice two things at a time. And so the problem here is that we have this score line. I have just the two selected, but it's still not letting me slice, and that's because we have an attached set. So even though I only have the card base selected, I don't have the score line, it still won't let me. So in order to do what I want to do, I'm going to have to detach the card. So I select the card and the score line, and then I click detach. And now it kind of messed up, put the star underneath because it made this higher priority. But now this score line is actually disconnected, and I can move it, and that will allow me to select only the card and the star is still there even though you can't see it. We could bring it back up just to make it a little easier to see where the star's at. We want to, I didn't get real picky here. We want it somewhat centered on the front of the card. So eyeballing it, that looks pretty good. So now we can select the card and the star, and I'm just selecting those by holding down the control button. So I selected card or star and card over here on our menu, the layers menu, and now you can see slice is now enabled. So I will slice. And like I said, that's just taking the outer edge of the star and just cookie cuttering that through all of the layers. So now we can see there is this piece of, this was part of the card base. It's now a cutaway. I can pull that aside. And then this is my original star. So what I have left is the card base with the star cut out. Now, if you want your score line for your card back, it's optional. And if you've moved it around, you could just delete it and just score your card manually after you've cut it or fold it. You know, you can usually get a pretty good line, but I do like having that score line. So I'm going to go ahead and reselect my card. And again, it's easier to do that over here on the layers menu than it is visually, because right now that score line is underneath the card. I could move the card backwards so that that appears, but right over here I can just pretty easily select those two things using my control button, and then I want to click attach. And so now, and I'm not sure why it's not showing up. I think it's because the score line's actually kind of down underneath. But it is there, at least I believe so. We'll see when I actually cut it out if that score line appears. So we're going to cut out the card base. These stars that we cut out, I'm just going to delete those. You could hide them If you wanted to save them, you know, if you're doing a project and you want to put the stars somewhere, you could. So now all I have left is just my card base. It has the cutout, and according to the layers palette over here, it does have the score line, even though I can't see it. So I'm not sure 100% that that's going to show up, but it is attached to the card, so it should. Okay, so we're ready to cut out. I'm going to click on the Go. And now you can see on my mat, here is the card, and it has the cutout. It's not showing the score line over here, but it is showing it in the preview over here on the left.
Okay, so now I am ready to get started. I have my craft paper on my mat, and I have, you'll notice the scoring tool in the second carrier. I'm just now changing my material setting to cardstock, because even though this is a craft paper, it is cardstock weight, so that's the appropriate one. And as you can see, the machine already told me to press the little cut button, so it is cutting. One tip here, notice that I'm not using a full sheet of paper. I already made one of these cards, so I just used the paper that was left over. Since it is 5.5, I knew it would fit, because 5.5 times 2 is 11, which is less than 12. It is close there because the Cricut never goes completely out to the edge. One thing to keep in mind when you are using scraps of paper is that the Cricut machine will always start on the left-hand side when you're facing it. And here we go. We're going to do the stamping and assembling of the card. I've already got my stamps loaded onto my blocks. I don't know if you can see it, but it did do the score mark. So I know when we were looking on the screen in Design Space, we weren't real sure because it didn't show it on the preview. Okay, so I'm using a sapphire ink, and on the front of the card, I'm stamping "Have a Day Filled With." And then on the inside, I'm going to complete that phrase with the hope. I decided it looked best down there at the bottom. So you can see I'm just kind of playing around with this. On the inside, because the craft paper is kind of dark, I cut a piece of white paper, and I made it just a little bit narrower than that inside, and you'll see why in just a few minutes. But that gives me something nice and clean to stamp on. And normally I would only stamp with the paper that I'm stamping on underneath, and I don't attach things before I stamp. But in this case, I really wanted this star to line up correctly, so I went ahead and attached the white piece to the base and then stamped right through the hole so that it would line up exactly how it should be. And then there's the word hope. So now it says "Have a Day Filled with Hope." It looks a little plain, so I grabbed my shimmer trim. And if you're not familiar with this amazing product, it is oh so shimmery, and it comes in lots of fun colors. I am doing red to kind of stick with the patriotic theme. So now I have red, white, and blue. And it is self-adhesive, so I'm just putting one little strip of the red shimmer trim on that side. And ta-da, there we go. So the shimmer trim just adds a lot of extra spark there to the edge. And as you can see when you close it, with that scalloped edge, you can see that sparkle coming through. Okay, the final touch is an enamel dot, and I just thought it needed a little more red on the card. And here you can see with the plastic backing, I can check to see what size of heart looks the best. I picked a larger one and just stuck it there in the center of the star, just to kind of give a little finishing and to draw the red, white, and blue all together. There we go. I love how simple this card is. But yet, because you designed it yourself, it is totally unique. Here's another view of the outside and of the inside. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel and check back often.